Growing up, I watched my brother Brandon get everything handed to him on a silver platter while I became invisible. Private tutors for every subject, a $30,000 BMW for his 16th birthday, a guaranteed job at our father's company straight out of college. Meanwhile, I worked nights at a grocery store to afford my used Honda. My parents never asked about my grades, my dreams, or my struggles. But last summer, at a family barbecue, Brandon discovered I had quietly built a seven-figure net worth, and he exploded. That is when my Aunt Linda revealed the family secret that explained everything and shattered the golden child illusion forever. Before we dive into this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments. If stories about overcoming family favoritism and building success on your own terms speak to you, smash that like button and subscribe. This one has twists that will make your jaw drop. Let's get into it. I am the younger son in what looked like a perfect suburban family outside of Boston. My father owned a successful commercial real estate firm. My mother worked as an interior designer for wealthy clients. We lived in a five-bedroom colonial with a pool and belonged to the country club. From the outside, we had everything. But inside that house, there was a clear hierarchy, and I was at the bottom. Brandon is 4 years older than me. From my earliest memories, he was the center of our parents' universe. When he struggled with math in third grade, they hired a private tutor who came to our house 3 times a week at $80 an hour. When I struggled with reading in second grade, my mother told me to try harder and handed me a library book. When Brandon showed interest in soccer, my father signed him up for an elite travel team that cost thousands per season, bought him the best equipment, and drove him to tournaments across the Northeast every weekend. When I asked to join Little League, my father said he did not have time for two sports schedules, and maybe I could do something that did not require so much parental involvement. The pattern continued through our entire childhood. Brandon got the newest gaming consoles on release day. I got his hand-me-downs years later. Brandon went to summer camps for leadership and sports. I stayed home or went to the cheapest day camp my mother could find. Brandon had a closet full of name-brand clothes. I wore whatever was on clearance at Target. I learned early that asking for things only led to lectures about being grateful for what I had, or comparisons to Brandon's needs being more important. The worst part was not the material things. It was the attention. My father attended every single one of Brandon's soccer games, cheering from the sidelines, taking him for celebratory dinners afterward. He missed my school plays, my award ceremonies, my track meets. When I made the honor roll for 4 consecutive semesters, my mother glanced at the report card and said, "That is nice," before returning to a phone call about Brandon's college application essay. When Brandon made the honor roll, once they took him to his favorite steakhouse, and my father gave a speech about how proud he was. I tried to understand it. Maybe Brandon was just more talented, more charismatic, more deserving somehow. I internalized the message that I was less important, less worthy of investment. So I stopped asking for anything. I stopped expecting my parents to show up. I learned to be self-sufficient because I had no other choice. The car situation crystallized everything. On Brandon's 16th birthday, my parents surprised him with a brand new BMW 3 Series, $30,000 of gleaming silver metal with a giant red bow on top. They threw a party and invited all his friends. My father made another speech about how Brandon deserved it for his hard work and dedication. I watched from the kitchen window, not even invited to stand with the family for photos. 2 years later, when I turned 16, my parents took me to a used car lot and said they would contribute $2,000 toward whatever I could afford. I had been working at Stop and Shop for a year, stocking shelves and bagging groceries for $9 an hour. I had saved $3,000. Together, we barely covered a 10-year-old Honda Civic with 140,000 miles and a dent in the rear bumper. My father lectured me about responsibility and maintaining it properly. There was no party, no photos, just a handshake and a reminder to keep up with the oil changes. College was more of the same. Brandon went to Boston College, a private school with tuition over $50,000 a year. My parents paid every penny. Room board tuition, spending money, fraternity dues. Brandon pledged the most expensive fraternity on campus and lived in an apartment off campus his junior year that cost more per month than most people's mortgages. He majored in business administration because my father wanted him to eventually take over the real estate firm. When it was my turn to apply to colleges, my parents sat me down for a conversation I will never forget. My father said they had invested heavily in Brandon's education and unfortunately could not afford to do the same for me. He suggested I look at state schools and apply for financial aid. I qualified for some scholarships based on my grades, which were significantly better than Brandon's had ever been. But I still had to take out loans for the remainder. I worked 2 jobs through college waiting tables at night and doing freelance graphic design work whenever I could find it. I barely slept. I graduated with $40,000 in debt. Brandon graduated with 0 debt and a job waiting for him at our father's company. Vice President of Development, a title my father created specifically for him. $75,000 starting salary plus bonuses. An office with a view. Business cards with his name embossed in gold. My father threw another party to celebrate Brandon joining the family business, toasting to legacy and future generations. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer science. My parents did not attend my graduation. They were on vacation in Nantucket that weekend, a trip they had planned months in advance. My mother called to say congratulations and promised to take me to dinner when they got back. That dinner never happened. When I got my first job as a software developer at a tech startup in Cambridge, making $50,000 a year, I called to tell them. My father said, "That is fine," and asked if I had talked to Brandon lately because he was doing so well at the firm. That was when I made a decision that changed everything. I stopped trying to get my parents' attention or approval. I stopped sharing my life with them. I went to obligatory family dinners and holidays, smiled politely, asked Brandon about his work, and volunteered nothing about my own life. When my mother asked what I was up to, I gave vague answers. Work is good. Nothing new. Same old, same old. They never pressed for details. They never seemed to notice I had stopped actually talking to them about anything meaningful. What they did not know was that I was pouring every ounce of energy into my career and my side projects. The startup I worked for was developing innovative software for supply chain management. I was not just doing my job. I was learning everything I could about the industry, about business development, about what made companies successful or fail. I watched Brandon coast at our father's firm, showing up late, leaving early, relying on the family name to excuse mediocre work. I watched my father cover for him reassign his projects when he dropped the ball, give him credit for deals he had nothing to do with. Meanwhile, I was building something real. I started freelancing on the side, taking on development projects for small businesses who needed websites and custom software solutions. I saved aggressively, investing in index funds and learning about personal finance through books and podcasts. I lived in a tiny studio apartment in a not great neighborhood and drove that same Honda Civic that was now pushing 200,000 miles. I did not go on vacations or buy expensive things. Every dollar went toward building wealth and security. 3 years after graduation, two coworkers and I started our own company. We had identified a gap in the market for cloud-based inventory management systems designed specifically for mid-sized retailers. We worked out of a shared office space in Somerville, coded until 2 in the morning most nights, and lived on ramen and coffee. My parents had no idea. When they asked about work at family dinners, I said it was going fine. When they asked if I was still at that tech company, I said I had made a change, but it was nothing exciting. The first year was brutal. We barely paid ourselves. I maxed out my credit cards and worked a weekend job doing IT consulting to keep myself afloat. But slowly, our software started gaining traction. We landed our first major client, a regional grocery chain with 50 locations, then a sporting goods retailer, then a furniture company. The revenue started flowing. We hired our first employees. We moved into a real office. By year 3, we were doing $2 million in annual revenue and growing fast. I still told my family nothing. At this point, it was partially about privacy and partially about something darker. I wanted to see how successful I could become without them ever noticing. Would my father ever ask detailed questions about my career? Would my mother ever wonder why I never seemed stressed about money anymore? The answer was no. They remained laser-focused on Brandon, who was failing spectacularly at the family business in ways my father kept hidden from everyone, including my mother. Brandon had lost the company 3 major deals through incompetence and laziness. He had been late to crucial meetings. He had failed to file important paperwork. He had alienated long-term clients with his entitled attitude. My father kept bailing him out, restructuring his role, making excuses. Brandon bought a condo in the Back Bay that he could barely afford and leased a new Porsche. He posted constantly on social media about his lifestyle, the restaurants, the clubs, the vacation homes he stayed at with wealthy friends. My parents reposted everything, beaming with pride about their successful son. I drove my Honda, lived in my modest apartment, and built my company. By year 5, we were acquired by a major tech corporation for $28 million. My share, after splitting with my co-founders and paying back early investors, was $9 million. At 30 years old, I was a millionaire several times over. I invested wisely, diversified my portfolio, and started looking for my next venture. I still told my family nothing. My mother would call occasionally and ask how I was doing. Fine, I would say. Work is good. She would immediately pivot to talking about Brandon's latest accomplishment, a term I used loosely since most of what she described was either fabricated or exaggerated. My father never called. On my 30th birthday, my mother sent a card with $50 in it. On Brandon's 30th birthday, the year before, they had thrown him a massive party at the country club with 200 guests. I did not attend Brandon's party. I told them I had to work. In reality, I just did not want to watch another celebration of the golden child while I remained invisible. I spent that evening at a nice restaurant with actual friends, people who knew the real me, who celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges, people who saw me as more than Brandon's less important younger brother. The summer I turned 32, my mother called to invite me to a family barbecue at their house. Just family, she said. Your Aunt Linda is coming up from Connecticut. It will be nice to all be together. I almost declined. These gatherings were always the same. My father and Brandon talking business while my mother fawned over them. Aunt Linda, my father's sister, asking polite questions nobody really cared about. Me sitting at the periphery, counting the minutes until I could leave. But something made me say yes. Maybe curiosity. Maybe a small, stubborn part of me that still wanted my family to see me. Whatever the reason, I agreed to come. The barbecue was on a Saturday afternoon in July. I drove up in my Honda now with over 250,000 miles, but still running because I maintained it obsessively. I parked on the street behind Brandon's Porsche and my parents' matching Mercedes sedans. Walking up the driveway, I could smell burgers on the grill and hear conversation drifting from the backyard. My mother greeted me at the gate with a quick hug. So glad you could make it. Brandon is inside grabbing more drinks. Your father is at the grill. Linda is on the patio. I walked through the yard I had grown up in, past the pool, where Brandon had thrown countless parties I was never included in, past the gardens my mother had professionally landscaped. Aunt Linda spotted me first. Alex. She pulled me into a real hug, not the perfunctory kind my mother gave. You look wonderful. How have you been? I gave my standard vague answer, but Linda had always been different from the rest of my family. She actually listened. She asked follow-up questions. She remembered details from previous conversations. We talked for a few minutes about her work as a therapist in Connecticut and her recent trip to Maine. Brandon emerged from the house carrying a cooler of beer. He barely acknowledged me. Hey, want a beer? I took one, and we stood in awkward silence for a moment before he wandered off to talk to our father at the grill. My father waved at me. Glad you made it. Burgers will be ready soon. That was the extent of his greeting. We ate lunch at the patio table. The conversation centered, as always, on Brandon. He was talking about a new development project at the firm, describing it with the kind of vague buzzwords people use when they do not actually understand what they are talking about. My father nodded along, occasionally interjecting with actual business insight. My mother praised Brandon for being so dedicated. Aunt Linda caught my eye across the table, and I saw something there. Understanding, maybe. Or pity. After lunch, Brandon started complaining about his condo fees going up. $500 a month is ridiculous, he said. I do not know how people afford to live in the city. My mother made sympathetic noises. Your father and I can help if you need it. Brandon waved her off. No, I am fine. Business is good. Just annoying, you know. I kept quiet, sipping my beer. Then Brandon turned to me, as if suddenly remembering I existed. What about you, Alex? Where are you living these days? Still in that place, in Somerville. There was something dismissive in his tone, like living in Somerville was shameful. I moved, I said simply. I am in Beacon Hill now. I bought a place last year. The table went silent. Beacon Hill was one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Boston. My mother looked confused. You bought? How did you afford that? Before I could answer, Brandon laughed. Come on. He probably has roommates or something. No way he bought a whole place there on a tech salary. Actually, I said calmly, I bought a 3-bedroom brownstone. No roommates. The words hung in the air. My father put down his burger. You bought a brownstone in Beacon Hill. Those cost millions. I nodded. 2.4 million to be exact. I paid cash. Brandon's face went red. What are you talking about? You paid cash. With what money? I looked at him for a long moment. The money I made when my company was acquired 5 years ago. Brandon stared. Company. What company? I explained briefly about the startup, the software we developed, the acquisition. My parents sat frozen. Aunt Linda was watching with an expression I could not quite read. Wait, Brandon said, his voice rising. You have been a millionaire for 5 years and never told us. I did not see the point, I said. You all seem very focused on other things. Why would I bother you with my boring tech stuff? My father found his voice. Alex, this is... Why would you keep this secret? Is it a secret if nobody ever asks? I replied. How many times have any of you asked me about my career in detail? How many times have you asked what I am working on, or how I am doing financially? The answer is never. You have never asked because you have never cared. That is not fair, my mother protested. We care about you. I set down my beer. Do you? Can you name the company I work for? Can you tell me what I do day to day? Do you know where I went to college or what my degree is? In. My mother opened her mouth and closed it. My father looked uncomfortable. Brandon was still red-faced, but now with anger mixed with something else. Embarrassment, maybe. This is such bullshit, Brandon exploded. You have been sitting here all these years, acting like you are better than us keeping secrets, and now you are rubbing your money in our faces. I am not rubbing anything anywhere, I said. You asked where I lived. I answered. You made assumptions. I corrected them. That is all. Brandon stood up his chair, scraping against the patio. You know what your problem is. You have always been jealous. Jealous of me. Jealous of what Mom and Dad gave me. Jealous that I was successful. And now you think having some money makes you superior. I stayed seated calm. I am not jealous, Brandon. I never was. I was hurt and ignored, but not jealous. And I do not think money makes me superior. I think building something through my own effort, instead of having it handed to me, means I actually earned what I have. Brandon looked like he was going to flip the table. Years of being the golden child meant he had never learned to handle criticism or challenges to his worldview. You ungrateful piece of... My father cut him off. Brandon, sit down. But Brandon was on a roll. No, I am tired of this. I am tired of him acting like he had it so hard. So what if Mom and Dad help me? They are my parents. That is what parents do. They invest in their children. They invested in one of their children, I corrected quietly. Not both. That is the point. Aunt Linda had been silent until now. When she spoke, her voice was firm. Brandon, sit down. I think it is time you learned something. My father's head snapped toward his sister. Linda, do not. Do not, what she replied. Tell the truth. They are both adults. Brandon deserves to know why he was given everything, and Alex deserves to know it was not his fault. What is she talking about? Brandon demanded, looking between our father and Linda. The color had drained from my father's face. Linda, please. Not like this. Linda ignored him. Brandon, she said you were not supposed to be born. Your mother had a very difficult pregnancy with Alex. The doctors told her she should not have more children. It was too dangerous. But 4 years after Alex was born, she got pregnant again, despite the warnings. She almost died, bringing you into this world. She was in the hospital for weeks. The doctor said it was a miracle you both survived. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I had never heard any of this. Brandon looked shaken. What does that have to do with anything? Linda continued. Your parents felt guilty. Guilty that they had risked everything to have you. Guilty that your mother almost died. So they made a promise. They would make sure you had every advantage, every opportunity, everything you could possibly need. It was their way of justifying the risk they took. Their way of proving to themselves that nearly losing everything was worth it. She turned to me. And Alex, you were the stable one. The one who came easily without complications. They took you for granted because you were their sure thing. You did not almost cost them everything, so they did not feel the need to prove anything to you. It was not fair, and it was not right, but it was their twisted logic. The backyard was completely silent, except for birds chirping in the distance. My mother had tears streaming down her face. My father stared at his plate. Brandon stood frozen processing. I felt oddly numb. On one hand, I finally had an explanation for years of being invisible. On the other hand, it did not actually make it better. It just meant I had been punished my entire life for not almost killing my mother. So you spoiled him to death because Mom almost died having him, I said slowly. And I got nothing because I was born without nearly killing anyone. Do you hear how insane that sounds? My father spoke for the first time since Linda's revelation. We did not mean for it to be so unequal. We thought you were more independent, more capable of handling things on your own. That is not an excuse for neglect, I said. Independence is not the same as not needing your parents. I needed you. I needed you to show up to my track meets, to celebrate my achievements, to help me with college, to invest in my future. But you were so busy overcompensating for your guilt about Brandon that you forgot you had another son. Brandon finally spoke, his voice strange. So everything I have, it was not because I deserved it. It was because they felt guilty. He looked at our parents. You gave me everything out of guilt, not because you believed in me. My mother reached for him. Brandon, of course we believe in you. But Brandon stepped back. No. No, you do not. If you did, you would have let me actually earn something. You would have let me fail and learn. Instead, you propped me up my entire life, and now I do not even know if I am actually good at anything or if it has all just been you covering for me. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than arrogance or dismissiveness in his expression. Actual pain. You really are a millionaire. On your own, I nodded. I built a company from nothing. Nobody handed me anything. Nobody bailed me out. It was terrifying and hard, and I almost failed a dozen times. But I did it. Brandon sat back down heavily. I have been working for Dad for almost 10 years. Do you know how many deals I have actually closed on my own zero? Every single success I have had at that company was because Dad fixed my mistakes or handed me something already done. I am 34 years old, and I have never actually accomplished anything by myself. The silence that followed was heavy with decades of dysfunction finally exposed to daylight. My father looked older than I had ever seen him. My mother could not stop crying. Aunt Linda sat quietly, having said what needed to be said, and I sat there feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. The barbecue ended shortly after that. Brandon left first, peeling out of the driveway in his Porsche. My mother retreated inside the house. My father stood by the grill, staring at nothing. Aunt Linda helped me clean up the patio. As we worked, she said quietly, "I am sorry it took so long for the truth to come out. I have been telling your father for years that the way they treated you was not okay. He would not listen." "Why did you tell us today?" I asked. "Because," she said, "watching Brandon explode at you for having the audacity to succeed on your own was the last straw. He needed to know. And frankly, so did your parents. They needed to hear it said out loud. What they did to you was not okay. And what they did to Brandon, ruining him with overindulgence, was not okay either. Both of their children suffered because they could not process their own guilt and fear." We finished cleaning in silence. Before I left, my father stopped me at the gate. "Alex, I do not know what to say." I looked at him, this man, who had been a ghost in my life, despite living under the same roof for 18 years. You could start with an apology. But honestly, I do not know if it would change anything. For the first time, my father looked ashamed. "You are right. I failed you. We failed you. And I do not know how to fix that." "You cannot fix it," I said. "Not really. You cannot go back and attend the track meets, or help with college, or treat me like I mattered. All you can do is acknowledge it, and maybe try to be better going forward. But I am not waiting around for that. I built a life without you. I have friends who are more family than you have ever been. I have success that I earned. I do not need your approval, or your guilt, or your sudden realization that you have another son." My father nodded slowly. "I understand, but I want you to know I am proud of you, even if I never said it before, even if I did not pay attention. What you have accomplished is remarkable." I felt something crack in my chest. Not sadness exactly. More like the final release of hope I had been holding on to without realizing it. "Thank you," I said. But I needed to hear that 20 years ago, not today. I drove home to my brownstone in Beacon Hill. I walked through rooms I had furnished exactly how I wanted. I looked at the home office, where I was already planning my next venture. I poured myself a drink and stood at the window, looking out at the city. My phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. "Can we talk? Sometime. Not today, but sometime. I want to understand how you did it, how you built something real." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Sure. When you are ready, let me know." Over the following weeks, things shifted in ways I had not expected. My mother called and actually asked questions about my life, my home, my career. The questions were awkward and late, but they were genuine. My father sent me an email, apologizing in more detail, and asking if we could have dinner sometime to talk. I said yes, eventually. Brandon and I met for coffee 3 weeks after the barbecue. He looked different, less polished, more uncertain. We talked for hours. He told me how lost he felt, how terrified he was that everything he thought he knew about himself was based on lies and advantages. He asked how I handled failure, how I pushed through fear, how I built confidence. I answered honestly. It sucked, I told him. It was terrifying. But every time I succeeded at something hard, I knew it was actually mine. Nobody could take that away from me. Nobody could say I did not earn it. Brandon admitted he was thinking about leaving the family business. Maybe starting over in something new. Something where our father could not rescue him every time he stumbled. I told him it was the best decision he could make. Not because I wanted him to fail, but because he would never know what he was actually capable of until he tried without a safety net. We did not suddenly become close brothers. Too much time had passed for that. But we found something like mutual respect. My relationship with my parents remained complicated. I saw them occasionally for dinners and holidays. They tried in their way to make up for lost time. But you cannot rebuild a foundation that was never there. What we have now is cordial, friendly even. But it is not the parent-child relationship I needed when I was younger. That ship sailed long ago. What I learned from all of this is that you cannot wait for other people to see your worth. Not your parents, not your siblings, not anyone. You have to build your own life, your own success, your own sense of self-worth. External validation is nice, but it is not the foundation. The foundation is knowing deep in your bones that you are capable and valuable, regardless of whether anyone else notices. I also learned that family dysfunction leaves scars on everyone, not just the scapegoat. Brandon got everything and gained nothing. He was raised to believe success would be handed to him, and now he has to rebuild his entire sense of self as an adult. That is its own kind of damage. My parents lived with guilt and fear that warped their judgment so badly they ruined both their children in different ways. Aunt Linda was right. Nobody won in that dynamic. Today, I am working on my next business venture. I have dinner with real friends regularly. I have learned to accept the family I have while not expecting them to be the family I needed. I have built wealth and security and a life I am genuinely proud of. Brandon is 3 months into a new job at a company where nobody knows his last name or his father. He is struggling, he tells me, but also learning. My parents are in therapy, trying to understand their own behavior. And me, I am finally free. Free from the need for their approval. Free from the bitterness of being invisible. Free to build whatever life I want. The brownstone in Beacon Hill is just the beginning. I am thinking about starting a nonprofit to help first-generation college students who need mentorship and support. I am considering investing in other startups run by people who remind me of my younger self, overlooked, underestimated, hungry to prove themselves. The best revenge, they say, is living well. But I have learned it is not about revenge at all. It is about refusing to let other people's limitations become your own. It is about building your own definition of success and living it fully, regardless of whether anyone applauds. It is about understanding that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest gift because it frees you from expectations and lets you exceed them on your own terms. So here is what I want to know from you. Have you ever been the forgotten one in your family? The one who had to build everything yourself while watching someone else get it handed to them? Or maybe you have been on the other side, realizing that everything you had was given, not earned. How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below. I would love to hear how others navigate family favoritism and build their own paths. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more real stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and overcoming the odds stacked against you. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth is not determined by whether their family sees it. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that you are capable of far more than anyone else's opinion of you suggests. Build your own life. Define your own success. And never wait for permission to become who you are meant to be. You deserve to be seen, but more importantly, you deserve to see yourself clearly. Take care, and remember that being underestimated is just the universe giving you room to surprise everyone, including yourself.